at the end of chapter 1, the plot of Age of Innocence is off and running, and chapter 2 picks up with the mystery woman who appeared at the end of chapter 1. And who is that? Who is that? What a scandal. Ellen Olenska. Olenska is named. Madame Olenska. Countess Olenska. She's the cousin of May Welland, and she has been off in Europe. She was married, and she's been living this somewhat scandalous, decadent almost lifestyle. We're starting to get some of the gossipy details of her life and her past. She's fresh from Europe. She's separated from her husband, who is vaguely European, British, something suspicious or foreign and exotic about him. We learn more about her grandmother, honestly, than we do about Olenska, the grandmother she shares with May Welland. They are first cousins. She's a curious figure of no particular social or financial standing, yet she associates with the aristocratic society of New York of the time, despite some, question about how much she belongs, because she is not of the high-born set. She's not of the very wealthy set. So she has these strikes against her, and yet, for some reason, she seems to be dominating the social scene. Archer in chapter 2 is dwelling upon he's dwelling upon the propriety of his fiancée associating so publicly with this woman of ill repute, this cousin who's a little bit dicey. And he feels very self-conscious about this, because in society you are not supposed to step out of line. And one thing we know about Archer at this point is that he likes to stay within the lines. He is a very conservative person, basically. And here he is being forced outside of that comfort zone, let's say. There was nothing mean or ungenerous in the young man's heart, and he was glad that his future wife should not be restrained by false prudery from being kind in private to her unhappy cousin. But to receive Countess Olenska in the family circle was a different thing from producing her in public at the opera of all places, and in the very box with the young girl whose engagement to him, Newland Archer, was to be announced within a few weeks. That little passage is, to me, so evocative, because it's giving you a sense of, well, okay, this is essentially, we're getting his perspective on this. It's what you call free indirect discourse, where the narrator just sort of steps inside the one character and gives from his voice, so to speak. So when you see, Newland Archer, that repetition of the name, it sounds so pompous when you realize it's kind of him saying, well, that's all happening to me. This outrage that his dignity or his honor, his standing in this very highly judgmental community has been called into question through association. He feels vulnerable and outraged from that. And yet, Madame Olenska's pale and serious face appealed to his fancy as suited to the occasion and to her unhappy situation, but the way her dress, which had no tucker, sloped away from her thin shoulders, shocked and troubled him. He hated to think of May Welland being exposed to the influence of a young woman so careless of the dictates of taste. Interesting. They're very concerned with the appropriateness of everything, how other people are going to see it. Very, very self-conscious. And also, here there is that little distinct note of sexuality. Her dress sloped away from her thin shoulders, and this shocked and troubled him. He is being disturbed by the sight of female flesh. The sexuality of that moment and all of the inherent repression of that moment is really significant. And you're getting a sense of this character who perhaps on a very subconscious level even, he feels sexually stirred maybe not even, he's probably not even aware of arousal at this point to get too much inside of his head. But there's a great sense of something is brewing with him, that you get the sense not himself, not the narrator, certainly not we as readers, are really given access to. We're kept at a bit of a remove. Archer goes and he enters into the opera box as a kind of a gallant gesture to rescue his lady, and just appear and confer his legitimacy, his unimpeachable character upon this scene. As he entered the box, his eyes met Miss Welland's, and he saw that she had instantly understood his motive, though the family dignity, which both considered so high a virtue, would not permit her to tell him so. The persons of their world lived in an atmosphere of faint implications and pale delicacies, and the fact that he and she understood each other without a word seemed to the young man to bring them nearer to any explanation than any explanation would have done. Her eyes said, "You can see why Mama brought me." And his answered, "I would not for the world have had you stay away." All of this is unspoken, but all of this is communicated. This is the world of Omerta. This is the mafia. This is how these people talk. It is an insider clique where they just know exactly what everybody is thinking, and nobody has to say anything explicit. There is a silent collusion to everything. But this is also a hint to the reader that if, in order to be one of these people, in order to share in this world, you can't look for explicit declarations. You need to read between the lines. You need to read the silences more than the words themselves. And this is an explicit term of meta-literacy, where we are being told how to read this book, how to make sense of this world. And it's a difficult thing to pick up. But once you're in that mode, it unleashes so much more meaning within the text. And at a certain point, we get Madame Olenska's first line. Always pay attention to the first lines of dialogue of any character, how they are brought on the scene, how they are introduced. And I would say that hers is quite significant. Olenska's first line is essentially playful, despite being delivered with we're told, a very grave expression, which hints at the kind of duality of the character. She seems to be having a little fun with what she's saying, but the way she's saying it is very serious and straight-laced. And that, again, is a sense of, well, you have to read into these things. You cannot take it all on the surface level. Everything has to be excavated for multiple layers. And you get that in those first lines that she has. "We did used to play together, didn't we?" she asked, turning her grave eyes to his. "You were a horrid boy, and kissed me once behind a door, but it was your cousin Vandy Newland, who never looked at me, that I was in love with." Her glance swept the horseshoe curve of boxes. "Ah, how this brings it all back to me. I see everybody here in knickerbockers and pantalettes," she said, with her trailing, slightly foreign accent, her eyes returning to his face. There is that indication right off the thing. We did used to play together. Like, they have been talking about him before he even arrived. So there's that sense of, again, that kind of clubbiness. And that sense of paranoia also, that, well, people are always talking about me. Everybody's been talking about her. They have been talking about him. So there's that paranoia perhaps going on there. New York society are always talking. But that that instinct for sexuality is again back. You were a hard boy and kissed me once behind a door. So you get this expression that when they were very young children, they used to play together. They were playmates in childhood, and they knew one another, and they haven't seen one another for many years now, but now they're sort of recalling it. But also, it's not just innocent play necessarily, because there is a kiss. Even among children, this is a sign of some passion. Notably, he kissed her. He was perhaps overwhelmed out of his polite little role in society, and he acted on a kind of passion, perhaps an innocent passion, but it's still a passion of sorts. It is a physical expression that is not necessarily made in public within this set terribly often. But also we're told very clearly that it was behind a door, so you get that added layer of discretion about how these passions need to be hidden away. And even in that moment, as unguarded as it may have been for him, it was a moment of deliberate discretion, perhaps, where he knew he had to hide those moments. And yet she counters again, so much going on in this one immediate first passage, that she was actually had a crush and perhaps a little girlhood crush on his cousin. It's always about small family relations in this world, and she had a crush on his cousin, but he never looked at her. So automatically there's that theme of impossible love, of the star-crossed lovers, perhaps, of love that is unattainable, impossible. And she uses that to harken back to her own childhood, where, I haven't been here in a long time, but it's bringing back so many memories, and I'm remembering knickerbockers and pantalettes, which I presume are fashions of an earlier age. She is looking around at the costumes people are wearing now and comparing them to the costumes people wore then. And the fact that they are costumes is, again, a reference to the theatricality of this life, of the performative nature of this life. Everything is exterior, but we need to read into that to find the interior. And with that, of course, we are given that final little detail that she says this with a slightly foreign accent. We are reminded that she is an outsider. She is now, for all of her childhood there, she is now very much an outsider. She is exoticized. Perhaps for the good, more likely for the bad. We're not sure at this point. There is a certain tutting about the decadent lifestyle of Europe already going on, and this sense that she is somehow corrupt in that. He mentions to her, you've been away a very long time, and she says, centuries and centuries, so long that I'm sure I'm dead and buried, and this dear old place is heaven. She's looking around and she's seeing New York as a kind of place of the dead, a land of the dead. Is it heaven? I don't know. Is it a place where cadavers are strolling around, not feeling, not living, not being vibrant human beings? Perhaps.